Hey, welcome. This is Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm your streamer. And we work on a Python project that is all about building a web application, a SaaS, a software as a service. And we're going to dig into a fun topic tonight about how do you ship static assets. So those are files like JavaScript, CSS, all that stuff. We're going to do it directly from Python. So if that sounds interesting to you, hope you'll stick around, join in. If you do find this enjoyable, I've got lots of ways to connect with me online. There's a website linked above. It also has my Twitter handle, all sorts of methods to contact me, Twitter, mailing list, etc. So that's there and available if you are so inclined. I also have a Patreon account, and I'm very thankful to my patrons, Patrick and Mark. Thank you for your support. If you want to support me on Patreon, throw a couple bucks my way. Please feel free to do so. Links are at my website that you can find out more. Okay, that's that. Let's talk about what we're going to do. We're going to work with a tool or actually a Python package called WhiteNoise. And I guess we can start from here. So, and I can phrase this in the context of why are we doing this? I have been on a long trip on these streams to simplify the deployment of my website, which is College Conductor. Don't worry about the details of what this site does. It's not really important. It's about college admissions, but we're not really going to touch on it much today in terms of the content of the site. But know that that's out there and in use by people. So what we're interested in doing is serving all of the CSS, images, JavaScript, all from Python. And so you might ask why, and that's a reasonable question, and it's to make my deployments even easier. So currently my deployment process works using Ansible, and it takes a bunch of stuff that I've already packaged up from continuous integration. It sucks it down onto the server, puts everything in the right place, and starts the web application server, which is all well and good. It's working just fine, but I can make it even simpler. And I wanted to do this partly to learn. I've never actually personally used WhiteNoise before, although I know what it's about and think that it should be a great tool for the job. But also to give you an idea of how to use it if you're coming at this to a new project. So I'm going to drop some notes over in the chat. You're welcome to chat with me. If you are civil, I will boot you if you're not. But ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. And then I'm going to leave a note for the topic for today is WhiteNoise, a package to serve static assets on a website. Cool. So that's where we're starting from. Like I said, I've never used WhiteNoise before, so as part of the time today will be spent like reading the documentation, figuring out what to do with it, how to configure it, and testing it out, running it through its paces. I guess I should add a couple of notes that I thought about before we even get into that, though, of what are the pros and cons. Like, why am I doing WhiteNoise versus what I'm doing currently? My current method of dealing with these static files is to use Nginx. Nginx is, in the structure of my website, Nginx is the load balancer. It's the thing that handles all the traffic coming into the site. So Nginx passes dynamic requests off to a gunicorn web server that's running my Python app. And that flow is fine. I don't want to change a lot about it, but the way it's configured right now is I actually have to deploy two different chunks. One piece of stuff for Nginx, which is all of the images and CSS, and then all of the Python application gets deployed separately. They're both like very related, but I've got them in separate spots and separate tarballs, like archive files that I'm pulling from S3, and just more than I need to do. And the reason that it's served that way is because Nginx is actually really, really, really good at serving static files. So if you have JavaScript, if you have CSS, there's some super efficient stuff that's happening in there. Nginx is talking basically directly to the kernel to load a file, get it into memory, and get it out as fast as it can. And WhiteNoise actually functions in a similar capacity. The difference is that, you know how I said Nginx is at the front, and then the Python Django Unicorn web app server is behind it. WhiteNoise exists in the web app server. So that might seem less efficient, and to be frank, it is a little bit less efficient, but it gives the simplicity of, instead of putting code here and here, I just put it in one place. And the web application gets deployed as an entire unit of just one thing that captures everything about my website in one chunk. So that's appealing from a simplistic deployment point of view, and that's the reason why we're walking down this path. So if that makes sense, awesome. If it doesn't, ask me a question. Like, I'm here to answer questions. I use this stream partly to like work on my own side project, but partly to educate. And if I'm not educating well, then I'm failing at my task of streaming. So yeah, ask questions. So I brought up the documentation for WhiteNoise, and I run my stuff on a DigitalOcean droplet. So it's basically a virtual machine that has got everything on it, but you might use WhiteNoise for a bunch of stuff. A very popular use case would be with like platform as a service providers like Heroku, which want you to serve everything from a single thing. So it's a perfect fit for Heroku, which is frankly the path that I recommend for a lot of people if they're starting out a business and they want to skip all the infrastructure stuff. Knowing how to deploy to Heroku properly is a really good skill to have. So that's useful. So we need to dig into WhiteNoise docs, figure out, we need to install it, and we need to then configure it to actually make use of it. One thing that WhiteNoise is going to have to do is know where all of my static files are, all of those CSS, JavaScript, etc. All of that stuff needs to be combined into the single package, which means we're going to have to fiddle with the continuous integration setup that I've created, and then bake it all into the same thing, and hopefully profit after that. But I'm guessing there's going to be some hiccups along the way. So let's get going. So there's a bunch of boilerplate, well, not boilerplate, it's prose that describes what WhiteNoise is about. I've kind of described it a little bit, and if you think about the name, WhiteNoise is kind of a cute, cheeky name, where the JavaScript CSS files are referred to as static assets. WhiteNoise is static, haha. That's what's going on. So that's why it has this sort of weird name. You can see a couple things that we'll actually get out of this that I don't currently do, or could get out of this, is that WhiteNoise will handle more than just Gzip compression. So my Nginx configuration right now only is configured to serve Gzip, which is fine. Like, Gzip is a great format. It does really good compression. It means that the bytes that you transfer over from the server to the browser are compressed so that there's fewer bytes to transmit, and that on the browser side they decompress it. And it turns out that this is a faster process than just passing all of the raw bytes over, even when you factor in the compression and decompression time. So Gzip is a popular format, but there is a new kid on the block, relatively, which is called Broadway, which has slightly better compression performance than Gzip, and is used by big companies like Google and stuff. So the fact that WhiteNoise can do that is awesome. I'm hoping to take advantage of that as part of this conversion from using Nginx to using WhiteNoise. And they've got notes about setting caching headers, all that stuff, which we will dig into as we get into it. So looks like this whole stream is about building a Django app, so we are in the right place. This is clearly targeting me and you if you're a Django developer. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We need to add WhiteNoise, and I actually one thing that's important when you're building a site, they've got this note to just install WhiteNoise, which is good quick start advice, but bad advice if you're trying to make something stable and repeatable. So we're going to go to pypi.org. You actually can't see the URL very well because it's so much is being covered up by this gigantic green lock. But this is pypi, the Python package index. We're going to search for WhiteNoise. And it's going to tell us that the latest version is 4.1.4. My project is staying pretty up to date on latest stuff, so we should be well supported with this version. So let's bring up some code and figure out what to do. The first place to start is with my requirements file. I use a tool called pip tools to actually make a requirements include file, which is why if you look at the bottom corner here, down here, it's a requirements.in, which stands for include. So it describes all of my top level logical things that I really know I depend on. And you use pip tools with a pip compile command to generate a requirements txt file. And that file, as you can see, it's generated by this tool, so it has a lot more information. And it includes all the extra stuff of like, why was this particular package used? Like Bodo core, for example, is used because Bodo 3 depends on it and S3 transfer depends on it. So it's the full transitive closure, if you want a computer sciencey term. So start off with a logical view that's on the right side here, and then the full view of everything that gets installed by the pip command is on the left. So we're going to come down to the bottom and we're going to say WhiteNoise equals 4.1.4, I think was the version, right? Yep. Okay. And you can see over here, I've got this comment about the command that I can use to regenerate this file, which I will just shamelessly copy and run here. And so we can see from the output, okay, WhiteNoise doesn't seem to have any particular dependencies, so all it did was replicate it here. But if you imagine a different package, let's say like requests, and you were looking through here, you're going to encounter some stuff that requests depends on, I think. Maybe that was a bad example. Well, yeah, I thought requests had some dependencies. That may have been a bad example. Nonetheless, something with dependencies would show the extra stuff that was needed. Okay, so we've got WhiteNoise. And now I'm going to say, I've got my generated file. So we're going to say pip install requirements txt to actually do the installation. So prior to this, it's just been like saying we want to install it. Now it's going through and apparently updating other stuff. I don't know what it's doing really. That's way more than I anticipated. But hey, whatever, that happens, I guess. So we have all the things that it installed. It brought along WhiteNoise along the way. So now that means that we have WhiteNoise available to us to use as a package when running the app. So let's look at the next thing. It looks like WhiteNoise uses a certain middleware, which is right here. And I can try and describe a little bit later what middleware does, maybe, if you're curious about it, but if you're not, we will just leave it. But it wants it to be pretty close to the top for good reason, just after security stuff, because you want it to happen early. Well, let's just go ahead and explain it. So middleware functions like an onion. The outermost layer of the onion is the thing listed at the top, which is security middleware. And then each level down is the farther and farther in layer of the onion. And at the very center of this onion if we're sticking with the analogy, is your actual app code. So when a view happens, after it's gone through all of these layers of middleware, it'll finally be passed to your view to execute whatever rendering or processing you devised, and then it will return back up out of the layers of the onion and show up here. So to explain why we want white noise so high is pretty logical, because if you think about it, you want the security stuff to always be kind of the front door, because it's trying to protect you from nefarious people. So leave that first. But then the very next thing that we have is white noise. And the reason why white noise is next is we want serving of images and CSS and JavaScript to be as fast as possible. And if we have, let's move this down just for fun. If it was here at the bottom, that means that before those images can be served, it's going through all of this Python processing of session middleware, common middleware, CSRF, so on, all the way down to waffle before it actually gets to white noise. And white noise is just going to say, go look on the operating system for the file and send it back out. I don't care about all the rest of the processing that just happened. So by having it be the second thing in the list, all we've gone through is the security stuff, which is what we want. And then here, it kind of short circuits the rest of the stuff. So it skips all the Python processing that it can and just says, you want an image? Here's your image. So that's why they recommend putting it high. Although maybe do they explain why? I'm not sure they do, but that's the reason, if you're wondering, why do they put this way at the top? Okay, well, that's quite a claim. That's it, you're ready to go. Fascinating. So let's read some more. So sometimes I tell people on the stream that part of doing software development is reading documentation. That's a reality of working with code you've never worked with. You have to understand how it works. So what does this say? We want forever cacheable files. Okay, that's files with hashes on them that have a unique file name, and if they are ever changed, they will have a different file name in the future. That's good. And compression support. Those both sound like good things. So it wants us to change our static file storages to this guy, compressed manifest static file storages. Let's see what we're currently using, right? Because this is already configured somewhere. Okay, this is not too different from what I'm currently taking advantage of, which is the straight up static file storages from Django itself doing a manifest. So it's probably very similar in function between the two. So let's just take it at face value that that's what we're going to need. And it's probably, the compressed part of that is probably handling that Broadway compression that I mentioned. Whoops. And all of that good stuff. So there is our static file storage setting. Okay, and what's next? We're not an other Whiskey app, we're a Django app, so that's okay, we can ignore that. We're not using a Flask app, so we can ignore this too. If you're using these things, obviously read these sections. Let's read the notes about compatibility, make sure this is all cool. I am deploying this stuff on Python 3.6, so that's squarely in that range. And I am currently on Django 2.0, I think, with some minor release after that for security bumps. So I think we're compatible. Praise from some well-known people in the Python community, and so on and so on. Okay, let's take a look. Let's posit these infrequently asked questions because I think they're interesting. So, isn't this horribly inefficient? And their answer is basically no, or only kind of sort of. And the reason it's not horribly inefficient is because WhiteNoise uses this send file syscall. So when you ask for an image, if it was to be served from Python itself and use Python's standard library stuff, it has to go through a lot of layers of Python to do that, load it into Python's memory. Not the best way to go. This send file syscall short circuits all that stuff. It goes, basically loops out of Python, says, hey, Linux kernel, give me this file, please. Just give me the memory. I just need it. And the kernel says, okay, here you go. And WhiteNoise returns that as the response of the bytes to read back. And as they note here, that is a very efficient process. So there's why it's not horrible. It's, there's a performance penalty there, because as I mentioned, it's going through Python security middleware for each request, plus any of the stuff that is in front of that. So Django has a bit of handling that happens before you even get to the middleware to parse an HTTP request and put it into a WSGI format. Won't bore you with all those details right now. So there's a bit of a penalty. That's definitely true, but it's pretty efficient. And then they make this comment about, well, couldn't I just put files directly in object storage like S3? And they note that no, you should not. The reason being is that object storage is not going to give you the headers to do like Gzip compression and Broadway and all of those kind of things. I think it might be able to with some extreme finagling, but it's not very easy. And so there's problems with that flow. Okay, so now this question looks like it gets to the very heart of what I started with tonight. I said, like, I'm currently running this from Nginx. Why would I switch it to purely Python? And so one answer they said is, well, when you don't have the other options available, that's Heroku squarely. But another option is, I mean, you can read some along with me. I'm just kind of reading to you, but there's some good reasons in here related to cores and compression and all that stuff. So what they advise, and what I don't do, but it's okay, what they advise to do is make your web server serve WhiteNoise and then put a content delivery network in front of your application. So a content delivery network works by acting as a cache for all of your files. So someone hits your website, you, instead of saying come to collegeconductor.com/static/ mylogo.com or .png or whatever it is, you actually say cloudfront. Some weird URL /mylogo.png, and your request will go to CloudFront, which is the CDN in this example. And if the CDN doesn't have that logo, then it forwards on the request to come to actually the College Conductor origin and say, hey, I don't have this in my cache. You need to give it to me. So it's at that point where it would actually hit WhiteNoise. And so you get that one performance penalty because there's a little bit of Python running there, but it would serve the appropriate file to the content delivery network with all of the correct headers, with all the correct compression, all of that good stuff. And so the CDN would hold on to that, remember the configuration that came with all those headers, and then serve out those efficient requests and forward them on in the future. So you take the performance hit that one time, and then the CDN is just doing all the work after that. That's a little bit more advanced configuration. Maybe I'll set up a CDN someday just to show it off, but that's something that they strongly suggest you do. Okay, so I've kind of beaten the why use WhiteNoise horse to death, if you'll forgive the expression. Let's take a look at Django to make sure we understand all of the bits in here that are needed as well. Because I'm not convinced this is done, but maybe I will be proven wrong. I'm looking back at my settings too, because I think there's something else going on here. Let's also bring up the production. Did I change any settings? No. Okay. So it's just whatever's in base. So the way to read this right now is that the static files directory is in the root of this repository in this assets directory. That's where I'm keeping all of my static stuff. And we can confirm that by searching around for it. Like here's my logo file. I'm not going to bring it up because it's binary, but let's see, can I get some, well, maybe I will bring it up. Who cares? So we've got some images that are in there. What else is in this place? Maybe I cleared out all these other stuff. But here's some font stuff, so on and so on. So that stuff gets put there. Coming back to our settings, when WhiteNoise runs, it's going to look for assets in that location, I think. So there's a big wrinkle to this process that I haven't described yet. I have taken my entire app and bundled it up into what is known as a zip app using a tool called Shiv. And so Shiv is awesome. It makes deployment super easy. It's like a single file. But we've got to figure out if WhiteNoise is still going to be able to read all of my files after everything's been bundled up. That might be trickier. That's going to be one thing we'll have to test for. So let's read on. Okay. So our static root is being put in a static directory, which is kind of relative to where we are. Maybe I can run that to show it off. So here I am in my listing here. And you can see that there is a I was pointing at my screen like you'd be able to see my finger. Good grief. You can see that there's a static directory down here. That file is not in source control. If I do a git log on it, that's a shortcut there, you'll see there's no history. So that was a purely generated file. I can destroy it entirely. Let's do it just for fun. So boom, it's gone. And then I can say manage collect static and blah blah blah. I just processed all that stuff and boom, it's back again. So that's where collect static actually takes all the stuff that you've been collecting in your assets directory and does any post-processing you need, which you can see here. Some of the stuff is getting tagged with certain compression and so on. And that compression, notice that it's got a .gz extension. That tells me that the static files stuff is already working, because that was not happening in my previous version. It was just plain old JS files. WhiteNoise is already ready to serve this stuff in a compressed format. So it's kind of pre-compressing it all for us, which is cool. So what else do we need to know? Let's go back to the docs. So we've got our static root, which we've defined. And we are already using the static attribute when we reference stuff in templates. We can prove that too. Let's look at a template, maybe the index template. We're loading the static template tag, and then anytime we want to do an image, we use the static template tag. And that makes sure what that does is it ensures that it does our lookup properly. So when I ran that collect static command, and maybe we can even find it. Let's search for university Ah, here it is. Okay. So it started off up here somewhere. I just had it a second ago. It said university.png. My brain is not seeing. There it is. .jpeg. And when it does the post processing, it has given a hash on it. So that is the efficient way that it can cache that forever. And so when we need to make a reference to it, though, we don't know the hash, and we'll never know the hash. So we use the name, the original file name, and the static template tag. What it does is it actually keeps a gigantic table of here's the original file name, and here is the cached name. So it replaces that. So when this page is actually served, it'll be served with a cached version. And to prove what that looks like, let's look at the source code over here. Here's an example. So here's the favicon of 32 by 32. The original is just the 32 by 32 PNG, but you can see it's got this 41606 stuff. This is the extra hash that makes it cacheable forever. That's all good. So I think everything so far seems to be working properly. And we've got, so we've matched the preconditions basically. And then we need to do, to enable WhiteNoise. We've already done that. Okay, let's look at the compression support, see if there's any more information, because I wanted to get that Broadway stuff and see if what it's going to take to do that. It might take installing a Broadway library on my operating system and in turn on continuous integration, but that would be a worthwhile thing to do if it can mean serving stuff faster. So that's kind of an interesting thing we can try. So it's taking care of compression. It's taking care of creating unique names for us. And that is all happening with that storage that I already mentioned. We can also do this with the compression, but without the caching. Like maybe if we were already handling all the caching ourselves through like Webpack or something like that. That's probably what this thing is for. Oh, interesting. So to enable Broadway compression, we're going to need the Broadway Python package. Oh, okay. Well, that is worth trying. So let's come back to our requirements file. And let's change it. And if you've never seen this before, when you have these like square bracket things after the package name, they're essentially optional things that you can install that are associated with the package. So the package has additional metadata in it, and maybe we can, this is a fun little tangent. Let's go to WhiteNoise on GitHub and look at the setup file so you can see this firsthand, because it's easier to show than to describe. So Python packages use a setup.py file. We can open that up and look for, right here, extra requires. So when you do this extras require thing, it is a way to optionally add extra stuff. I already have an example in my included stuff. So I'm using Wally as my Postgres backup tool. And Wally has a bunch of like plugins that it can know how to talk to various cloud providers to do backups. In this case, I'm using AWS, Amazon Web Services. So in order to back up to S3, I had to tell Wally, go get the stuff specific to AWS. So that's what's happening here with Broadway. So that'll should give us Broadway support. I'm interested to see what the collect static output will look like after that's all done. So let's run that pip compile command again and this time we might see more interesting output. So if we look at the requirements change, so now our requirements include is just WhiteNoise Broadway as we put in there, but the requirements txt is WhiteNoise, but it also includes Broadway, and you can see it's via WhiteNoise, so it gives you the full scope of packages. So let's do a pip install of the requirements file to get the Broadway package, which it just did. And now let's destroy the static directory again, just to give us a clean slate to see what kind of output this will produce. And run manage collect static. Cool. You can see it's taking longer. It's chunking on it. That's because it's essentially doing all of the compression that your users would hit. It's doing that upfront once so that no one else has to hit that. Otherwise, your web server itself might be the one doing the compression on the fly. And it's generating double the number of files. So we now have a Broadway file, a BR file, and a Gzip file. .gz. That's a really easy win right there. I'm super impressed with WhiteNoise in that regard. So good job, WhiteNoise. Curious what the size, so there's a trade-off, right? It's now a bigger directory. So what is the size of the static directory? That's only 13 megs. But I don't have a very big project, so that's not that big. Cool. So now you understand, hopefully, how you can install extra packages from certain packages on PyPI, and how that's set in the packaging stuff. So let's come back to this. We were on the content delivery network. I'm not doing that right now, frankly. So let's move on. Okay, this will be important because I do want to be able to run this locally and not have to run collect static every time we make a change. I need to figure out how this works properly. So they're suggesting use WhiteNoise for development as well. I'm okay with that. Okay. So this looks like a pretty simple addition of running with run server no static. Now there's an interesting aspect to this. They're assuming that I'm using Django's run server, but I'm not. When I want to bring up my site locally, I use a tool called Honcho, which is a tool that is like Foreman and Ruby, if you're familiar with that. But it has this proc file format, and the proc file says you want to run a few things. One of the things that I want to run is gunicorn. So I'm not actually sure how this will behave. Let's try it out. So we want to say honcho start, which will start everything up. And it's going to start up all the pieces. And my site is available on, where to go? There it is, localhost 8080. Oops, localhost 8080. Cool. It all looks good to me. What static files did it use? Okay. So seemingly it ran, and let's look at the page source. Okay, it's running with the it seems to be running with a different set of static files. So did I have a different set of static file settings? That's a really good question. I have a development settings. No. I wonder how that's working. This is an example where I don't really know. I don't know why it's working this way versus trying to serve it with the compression and the caching stuff turned on. The clear indicator would be that this file name here would have that long 416 blah 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 number after it, and it doesn't. So it's definitely doing something different. It's not working from a manifest, and I'm not sure why that is, because I don't think I've set static files anywhere else. So that's fascinating. Maybe it's just the fact that debug is set to true. But I don't know. That's a curiosity. Because we're at the end of the file. There's not a lot of setting in here to even look at. I'm gonna let that one remain a mystery. I don't feel like digging into that. But that's curious. And if anybody happens to know or has used WhiteNoise before, give it out a shout in the chat, and I would love to understand why. Yeah. Is that gonna bug me enough that I'm gonna want to go figure out why? It's okay. We'll live with a little bit of a mystery in our lives. Okay. So we have done. We've confirmed that running the dev server works. What I haven't done is confirm that that this will work for the actual, what am I trying to say? The built version. Sorry, the package. I was losing my train of thought. So, good grief. Let's try that. Let's see if we can run it from the packaged version. And I'm going to remove this other packaged version, and we'll see how it goes. So the way to build my package is we're running a package script, and don't worry too much about this one if you haven't watched past streams, but that should be enough to do it. So what I'm going to try and do is create the package, put it in a different directory, so it's definitely not like getting to this static just by lucky chance, and see if the stuff still works. I'm really curious about this. So it bundled up everything into one thing, installed it all, probably just about done. Okay, let's make a quick directory called testing, and we'll move the conductor thing into that testing directory. Again, this is just trying to give me a clean place where I can do the testing in confidence that nothing else is affecting it. In fact, I'm also going to deactivate the virtual environment, so even that is not a factor. First thing I want to do is unzip this thing, because I'm super interested to see. So that should dumped a bunch of files in there. And if we go into site packages and now go into conductor, which is installed in there, what static files does it see? I'm not sure it sees any. Because my production configuration is not factoring in static files, because as I've said, my production configuration is currently deferring to Nginx to do that. So I think that's probably indicative of there's a failure in the script. I pretty strongly suspect that this is not going to work. So let's clean up all this junk, because Come on. Because I don't want it affecting our test. So let's get rid of environment and let's remove this. Because if the way site packages, the way Shiv works is by putting all of the code into a single thing, which it then extracts and runs. So if I run this as an executable like this, it's going to do the work, it's going to fire up to Unicorn, and everything should be ready to go. Except it's not. I forgot any of the settings. So that's one thing I'm comfortable copying. So let's bring that up. It's up here and copy to here. All right, so I lied a little bit. It does need settings, but I'm okay. That's a trade-off, that's okay. And a topic for a different day, which I also want to fix. I want to clean that up too. So let's try this again. No module named debug toolbar. What are you trying to do? You're trying to run. Never easy, is it? Let's change to a different set of settings. Staging. I think I'm getting myself in a hole. This isn't probably not going to work, but we'll carry on. So we want to try and run the staging settings instead of the development settings, because the development settings are looking for the debug toolbar, which we're not going to have, or not going to have installed in the package, I should say. Oops. Settings module, not setting. Yeah, okay. Just as I feared, it's looking for a static directory for the files. And unsurprisingly, that's not there. So the packaging script now needs to get a little bit smarter. It needs to run collect static, and the package needs to bring that in. So what can we do? Well, we can kill out of that and go up a directory and nuke that whole test area because we don't need it. And we can go back to settings. So static root is still what we want. That's still a good thing. We just need to make sure our package actually has it. And the way to do that is to go to the manifest of the packaging step. And right now, it's all maybe we need to change where the static files are put. I think that's going to have to be a change. I should probably talk about why, right? So, manifest include is a step required for Python packaging. Not required. It is a useful tool, and it's a way to declare extra data that you want in your stuff. The challenge with it, I think, is that it wants it to be in a Python package. So conductor, in this case, is a Python package. I think if I copy this and change this whole thing to just static like that, I don't think that's going to work. Or I don't think it's going to give us the result that we want. Put it that way. So let's try that change. And let's attempt to build that. So we're going to run Python 3 setup.py sdist. Oops. Give it the circle file one. I'm faking a SHA here. because when it runs, this package is normally built in Circle CI, and Circle CI populates this SHA-1 environment variable, which I don't have locally. So I'm kind of just faking it just so that I have something. Okay, so it put it in there, but I don't think it put it in the area that we want it. We have this dist thing now, and if it's created a tarball, I'm getting pretty deep in the weeds. I apologize if you're new to this stuff. So we want to inspect this thing. Whoops, let's put that through a pager. So this seems okay, but it's really not. And it's really not for a couple reasons. Why in the world are you there? Ugh, okay. This static directory is not in a good location or a known location. So if I were to try and install this version of Conductor, I actually don't know where I would try and put that static directory. It might try and put it at the root of site packages, which is not great. Okay, so what can we do? I think we need to change the setting. We're going to put our static file somewhere else and try it that way. Whoops. So let's come up directory. Let's go back to the settings base file. And go back to that static files area. And this time I want to say static root is going to be, what's it going to be? Where do we want to put this stuff? OS path join router conductor static. Is that good? So now, like right now, this is just apps and stuff and templates. But this would actually put static in there as well and make it part of the package. I think I'm okay with that. The other thing that we're going to have to do in order to do this properly is come back to the manifest. Now it's going to be conductor static. So that will properly put the static directory underneath the conductor package, which is what we want. So that when the package stuff creates, it'll do that. But the other piece of this is to run collect static. And that running collect static is going to have to be part of the packaging process, I think. Okay, so let's see what's happened now. We put all the stuff, so this whole directory, this root level directory is named conductor. So conductor here is the Python package below it. And then we've added a static directory. So now this static directory at the top is dead and useless. And the static directory in here is what we really care about. couple tests I want to run. One, if we do this, let's remove that whole thing. So now we should have no static files anywhere. What happens if we run Honcho development server? Is it going to be missing static files? If so, I guess it's not the end of the world, but or it could be looking at the static files directories. I'm not sure where it's going to serve it from. Ah, okay. So in development, it must be running it from too many files. Must be running it from the static files directory stuff, which is defined as assets right now. So static root comes into play only when you run the collect static command. It's the output directory where all the stuff ends up. It's a little confusing. Okay. So we've said it's going to collect the static stuff. Let's go back to the package script. And we need to say what? We need to say no. Oh, no problem. I'm glad to show you as much magic as I can muster. You know, Python is usually pretty good about not having magic, but sometimes it's in there. Appreciate the compliment. So we need to run collect static to get this going. So let's say Python 3 and then manage.py, which should be at like the root of this whole project, and then collect static. And it's going to slow down the packaging step, but it's a required thing because now remember we're trying to bundle all this stuff together. And when we get to CI, this was stuff I was having to do anyway. So this will save us another step in a different part of the process. So let's try, let's exit out of Honcho. And just to put us at a clean slate. Oh, I already killed that. Cool. Let's run the packaging script to build a new Shiv app. And then we will test that out, see if it actually works this time. So we have no conductor Shiv here. So let's do circle SHA-1 again. And I'll just use ABC again, because again, it doesn't really matter. It's just giving it a name for this version. And we run package. And so the first thing it does now is running collect static, which is creating that static directory within conductor. And then when Shiv runs, it's going to package up everything. And because we've included that entry in manifest include, it should also suck in the static files. So when we inspect that conductor app again, we should see the static files in there properly this time. Or you know what, we can skip that whole verification because we can just try running Shiv. And if you recall from just a few minutes ago, when the directory wasn't there, Shiv gave up and said, I can't find the static files. I don't know where they are. I think I already see a problem, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so we've got our PYZ file here. That's what the Shiv output format. Let's make our little testing area again and move that PYZ into the testing directory and go in there. And just to prove there's nothing up our sleeve, we're going to deactivate the virtual environment. Okay, so now running conductor, almost. We need to, doesn't have the Django debug toolbar, so we're going to pretend and use setting the staging settings. Staging, not stating. And I think that should do it. I think it's still going to fail. That's my prediction. Ah, crap, forgot that. Forgot the settings again. Okay, try again. Okay. So no directory. All right, so it's trying to look in here for conductor, but here's the problem. This doesn't exist. Like if I quit and do an ls here, there is no conductor directory. And this was something that I had to get right when I did this for templates as well. I had to change some settings and I forgot about it. So we're going to go back and change those. Okay, so let's look at, let's go back to our base file again. And let's jump down to the templates area and you can see this. In fact, this is the answer right here. So because, all right, now we need to get into a little bit of Shiv, what Shiv does. Shiv is, it isn't a zip archive, but when it runs, and you can see it, you can even see it when the first time it executes, it's a little bit slower. What's happening is it is extracting all of that stuff to a temporary, or not a temporary directory, to a separate directory for the purpose of enabling some weirder stuff. So if you are like in Python, something you might encounter, I'll drop it in the chat, is dunder file. And dunder is a Python-ism to say double underscore, so dunder. And that is a technique to say what is the file where this package is coming from. And if you try to run a zip app just purely out of memory, this value, this variable of file does not have a value. And so stuff blows up. There's a lot of things that expect this thing to exist. Apparently it's not something that you should rely on, but a ton of code does. So to get around issues like that, Shiv has just said, forget it. We're not going to try and run it straight out of memory, even though that would be faster. We're going to put it on disk somewhere and then run from over there. So it's kind of just handling the installation of stuff for you. And in fact, if we want to take a quick look at that, I think there's a .shiv directory where all of my every time I've tried to run one of these, it has extracted it into this directory. So that's looking under the covers of how Shiv operates. All right, so getting back over here, the problem that I said in the static files area is I was assuming that the root dir is the proper place to look. But it's not. The stuff is actually put over in this Shiv area, so we need to look for static files over in that area. So this conductor dir setting, which I have here in this example in the templates, is something that needs to be replicated with the static files. And so actually, what line is that? That's line 64, and the static files is much farther down, so we can actually just use that. So I think it's as simple as, and I use that word sparingly, but I think this is pretty simple, I hope you agree, to replace that stuff with conductor dir. And so now when the Shiv app runs, it's going to look for static files not relative to where the Shiv app was started, but relative to where Shiv extracted the stuff into a site packages in that .shiv area, and look in that site packages in that conductor package for a static directory. So that's what's going on here. All right, that was a lot of words. Let's try it out. So again, we will. Good question. What is root dir? Root dir is something that comes out of the Django start project. And unhelpfully, it's based off of base dir. So how do I describe this? We're using a combination of this file attribute that I just described with some os.path modification. So this, the way to read this is you can say, make sure that the path of this file attribute is an absolute path. In other words, it starts with /users. I guess is it your direction? Probably looks more like this, to do /users/mat/conductor, etc., etc. Getting down into the directory that this file exists in. The file attribute corresponds to the path for base.py. Okay, so base directory, base dir, by having os.dir name says, give me the directory for the file. So that's going to translate here to testing settings. Hope that makes sense so far. When you call dir name again, it's going to go up another directory. It's like using ... in bash or Z shell, and it will get us to this testing directory. So my earlier change, go back over there, and I'll just undo it for a second so you can see it, of saying root dir conductor static translates to testing /conductor /static. Okay, so by switching it around, getting rid of root dir and switching it to conductor dir, it's that calculated path that was in the shiv area. Probably clear as mud by now, but I hope that helped. Okay, so let's come back over here. Let's make another package. We will do the same circle stuff. I'll just this time call it def and run the package script. Oh, it wants to overwrite it. Yeah, sure, why not? I'm probably replicating some effort here. It's okay. So it's processing, creating a new shiv package, which then we will be able to test out. This is where it would be really nice if I had some background music, but I don't. Successfully installed. And I'm not sure what it's waiting on. There it goes. Okay. So we're going to move conductor def into that testing directory and go back in there. And again, we're going to deactivate the virtual environment. And what we have now is two versions. So we'll run Django, but instead of saying ABC this time, we'll say def. And hooray. Okay, that's a lot more. I still don't think this is going to quite work right, because these staging settings are expecting certain allowed hosts, so this will probably still blow up. But the fact that it didn't complain about not finding the static directories, that was the real win in the process. Let's come over here and try and run it. Yeah, so it's saying bad request, but that's totally reasonable because it's looking for a particular host. So I'm fairly confident that we did the right thing. Okay, so what do we have? And I might end up stopping after this point. I don't know that I want to spend the time to get into CI, but we may, who knows. We've added static to our package. We've told the packaging script to collect it all to make sure that we have it in the package or in the right location before we put it all together. We added WhiteNoise along with the Broadway extension, and we configured the middleware to use WhiteNoise, pointed at, whoops, how is that different? That's not correct. What's going on? It's not root there. What's up there? Did I not write that? Well, phooey. What happened? Oh, I'm in the wrong. I'm totally in the wrong settings. Okay. Well, we made the right modification, but we didn't put it in the actual source controlled area. That's why that worked, but also failed. I was using a copy of settings. So let's go make it the right modification in the right place. This is why you read your diffs, because sometimes you just screw up. Okay. Let's check it again. Got our static, collecting the static, got Broadway. There it is in the requirements. There's the middleware. There's the new static root. It's part of the package rather than just this relative floating static thing. And we've changed our static files storage to be the appropriate output. I feel good about all of that. I want to go ahead and commit this, and we will say add WhiteNoise to serve static files. And this is for the issue number of 393. Okay. I think I want to stop there, and I want to stop there because the next piece of this may not require a ton of effort, but there could be other pitfalls in there, and I don't want to be fumbling over that for the next half an hour. But next couple weeks from now, because I'm out of town next week, but the next time I stream, what we'll do is we will put this into CI, and the changes to CI could be extremely minimal because we're going to be removing some steps and using the same package script. So there's not a lot to do there. But we also need to make steps, make the changes to stop using Nginx for static assets and begin using our actual Django web server and letting it handle all of that. And there's probably going to be some tuning along the way in terms of caching headers, perhaps. There's going to be other bits. Hey, appreciate the follow, AptAct. Thank you. And so we'll do that stuff and put a big bow on this whole thing, and that will put WhiteNoise into the system, and then we'll deploy it out there, and it'll all be good. My vision for what we do beyond WhiteNoise is to clean up settings. You saw that mess that I had of copying a settings directory in there to test the app. And I want to use a tool, a little sneak peek, I guess, called GoodConf, I think. It's from an agency called Lincoln Loop. And it looks like a really nice way to handle settings in a very declarative style that uses a file to do all the proper settings configuration. It just seems like the right fit for a Django app. So that's probably the path that we'll walk down, but we'll just save that for later. So I do put these recordings up online. If you wanted to come back and review something that I said and see how I fiddled with something, those things go up on YouTube on my channel up there. I believe it's Matt Lehman, but search for building SaaS with Python and Django, or search for me, Matt Lehman, and I should show up fairly quickly. I'm also available on Twitter. If you want to have a more direct connection to me, you're available to follow me there and ask me questions. I'm happy to answer them, if they're on topic, more or less. But just that's a place where I'm at. There's good stuff on the website. I write pretty regularly about tech topics, so if you want to find out when I write something new, I have a mailing list that you can join. All of these are ways you can reach out to me. Hope you found this enjoyable tonight, and I guess with that, I'll bid you adieu. Good night.